Hey, welcome to a very special episode of Film Fanatics. It is our Fast and Furious mini-sode. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
With us is a special guest. We have listener Aidan with us to discuss all of the Fast and Furious movies and kind of give a new perspective because you grew up with these movies.
Yes, I did. I love them.
Cool.
Yeah, so figured we'd bring you into the fold and talk about each and every one. We've only ever reviewed number 7 on the show, so here we're going to review all of them, plus give you our top 5 characters. So, Aidan, let's take it away with the very first, the original, as it says on the DVD box, Fast and Furious.
Mm-hmm. In The Fast and the Furious, to make the distinction, Brian O'Connor, played by Paul Walker, is an LAPD officer who goes undercover in the Los Angeles world of street racing to investigate a series of electronic shipment hijackings. However, as he forms bonds with street racer Dominic Toretto and his crew, the lines between right and wrong become increasingly blurred. This one is obviously going to have some sentimentality since I love the series and I grew up with them. It's the first one, and I think there's a lot of good action in here. One of the things I really like is action sequences such as, first off, the hijackings that they include in this one. I think they're really well done. I like the way that Rob Cohen as a director pulled them off, and it's a good kind of preview of how his action would be directed in XXX and then later go downhill.
Yeah.
Guilty pleasure for last year.
Yeah.
But I really liked sequences like that. I think the action was well done. I think it was pretty intense for PG-13, especially back then.
Yeah.
Sequences like the race wars and just the street racing in general was really like... This is one of the only ones that really focuses on street racing. I think it was all really well done.
I noticed that.
I do like the action, like I said. I think there is definitely some plot holes, though. Obviously, it's not as much as some of the other films, maybe, but there's definitely a concentration on action opposed to plot. And there's definitely some red herrings thrown in throughout there that aren't necessarily the most convincing.
I don't know what you mean, Aidan.
And they kind of aren't the best, like, hidden, like, surprise, like, oh no, I can't believe it.
No, not really.
But overall, I do definitely enjoy this one for the action and for just starting the whole franchise and the craze. I think it's a good start to the series.
I think it does sort of kind of set the template for what all of the films are about, because I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say there's plot holes in all of them. There's definitely some red herring moments in, I would say, at least most of them. But you are right. This is really the only one that focuses solely on street racing as the main plot, basically. I mean, it's in most of the other first few in the series anyway, but just as a brief aside, Aidan and I actually watched all of them chronologically because I had only ever seen 6. So we saw this one first, and I really enjoyed it, actually. I was surprised how much. I liked 6, which we'll get to, but the first few in the series I kind of thought, I'm not that into street racing. We'll see how this is. But I liked the character development. I liked the interactions with the different people. It's obvious that a lot of these actors are kind of fresh. You know, Paul Walker's not really that great here, to be honest. But yeah, what do you guys think?
Well, for me, this is one of those movies that I'm actually really surprised is as dated as it is. You did mention Rob Cohen. I do enjoy XXX as a guilty pleasure. I just don't think he's that good a director. What surprised me about this when I was looking through the credits was there were 3 separate writers, one of whom was David Ayer, who did Fury from last year, and another show favorite.
Sabotage.
And to watch, as well as Sabotage. But,
oh, man. Two sides of the coin there.
But I feel like that's a big issue I have with this movie is there are a lot of different things going on, and I don't feel like any of them are particularly well fleshed out. I thought the acting was very wooden. The action sequences were okay. I felt like sometimes they were trying to be a little too, like, look how cool we are. But I feel like some of the best editing came later in the series. It's not a great start. I feel like for car aficionados, I feel like it has its place. It's just kind of meh.
Oh, see, I liked this definitely more than a few that followed, but I think the only thing that really dates it is the soundtrack.
which I loved.
which was great.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
great.
it definitely
No.
brought me back to 2001 or 2002, whenever this was made.
That's one thing I have to say that watching it, I actually really enjoyed. Is I got some of that nostalgia rush, especially in like the first 2 or 3 movies. There's a lot of like that old new metal, old rap that I really
Limp
like.
Bizkit.
Limp Bizkit, Kid Rock, and Disturbed. I'm just like that's kind of awesome seeing that. It wasn't always the most integrated, but I did find it kind of enjoyable. I'm kind of in between you guys. I think that it did have a lot going on, and it wasn't always the best directed. I think the thing that bugged me the most was that the acting for most of these people was a little wooden. I think you could tell Michelle
Yeah.
Rodriguez, I've seen her do a lot better. Vin Diesel was like, okay. Paul Walker I thought was all right, but this is pretty early. I thought,
Yeah.
but then again, I also thought some of the dialogue was questionable too. So, I mean, the script wasn't the best, but one thing I did like was actually seeing these characters interact and looking back on it, having seen the last movie, well, not the first time I ever saw a Fast and Furious movie, but having seen this one recently for Fast 7, going back and looking and seeing the relationship established, I liked seeing that, and I did think there was some good development between Paul Walker's character and Vin Diesel's, and I liked that. And I actually thought it was cool that it did focus so much on street racing, because I found it interesting that most of the other movies that followed did not do that, and that it was a part of the main plot I did like. I thought the action sequences were good. I actually liked the heists, and I thought it was interesting that it actually established that even though they did get further away from the actual racing, ironically, the heists and the whole crime espionage stuff was there from the beginning. So,
A little bit, yeah.
So it was there, and they just kind of expand on that later on, and I liked that. So for me, it was a pretty decent time. I thought it was enjoyable.
Let me ask you this, though, Joe. I said, I had only seen 6 previously. Which installments had you seen before we did Fast 7 for the show?
4.
Just 4.
Fast and Furious.
Okay.
Years ago.
Justin, how about for you?
Prior to the show, 3, 5, 6. Yeah, 3, 5, 6.
Okay. It's kind of an odd sampling. Why not 4?
At 4, I didn't really care when 5 came out. People at my work knew that I reviewed movies, and they were like, "You got to review 5." So I was like, "All right."
It was a big hit, yeah.
I won't turn you guys down. So I waited for Netflix and got it that way.
Okay. And Aidan, how old were you when the first one came out? Did you see that in theaters, or you saw 2 in theaters?
No, I actually saw the third one in theaters.
Okay.
But before that, I saw 1 and 2 when they were on video, and
Okay.
I was younger. But from 3 on, I saw every one opening weekend in theaters.
So you
after
did
that,
see them
yeah.
Big fan.
in
Yeah.
release order.
Yeah, I did see them. I didn't actually, though. It's really strange. The first PG-13 movie I ever saw was Too Fast, Too Furious, and that was like a big deal for me back then. And I saw that before I saw the first one, but then I was like, oh, this is great. I'll watch the first one, and then from then on, I watched them like
Okay.
in proper order.
Makes
but-
sense. All right, well, before we get into number 2, let's all give our grades for the first installment. Aidan?
I give it a B.
Okay, it's a B- for me. Justin?
See,
B-.
All right. Oh, Joe, you and I right on track there.
I had problems, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's definitely fun. But it has problems, like all of them.
I feel like the biggest problem was just that everyone was so new, and this wasn't the best script, so I felt the acting suffered because of that. But there are some good things in here.
Well, I think no one was really expecting anything from it. Obviously, when they
No.
made it, I don't think they were expecting a decade-long franchise.
Weird, how that
You know,
evolves, actually.
yeah. So let's move into a Too Fast, Too Furious, and Aidan's going to tell us about that.
All right. In Too Fast, Too Furious, the FBI/Customs has tracked down Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker, and enlisted him and ex-con and former friend Roman Pierce, played by Tyrese Gibson, to take down Miami drug lord Carter Verone, played by Cole Hauser, in exchange for expunged records.
That classic exchange.
That's, yeah, let's go take down the horrible criminal for getting my record expunged. Woo. That happens.
As far as this one goes, it's definitely a huge step down from the first one.
Yeah.
you say.
I do like some of the effects, and I think they have some cool sequences mixed throughout. I like the car garage scene where all the cars like spill out of the garage.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things, especially when I was younger, it was really cool. Like when they would blast someone out of the side of the car by like a button or stuff like that. Like it was pretty like cool back then. And I did personally, I really like Tyrese Gibson's character because I like
Justin's favorite.
I know
Shush.
Justin from listening to the Furious 7 talk that he's not a big fan, but I think he does add some good humor, and I do like to an extent that it didn't try to copy the first one. It went a different way. It tried to be more like outrageous and didn't take itself quite as seriously. But definitely One of the big problems, especially now that there's 7 movies, is it has no relation to the other movies.
Not really.
No.
Other than introducing like Tyrese's character and Ludacris, like that's pretty much the connection. The villain doesn't come back. Nothing else in this story relates to anything else in the franchise.
Which we could have just gotten from 4. He could have just been
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I know these guys from before,"
Yeah.
and leave it at that.
Even Mendes came back briefly.
Yeah, for the one sequence.
For the one little
in the
bit.
Credits, but,
Thank God.
He's a big part in this one. Yeah.
Love Eva Mendes.
and that is another one of my main complaints. I don't like the villain that much in this one. I think Carter Verone's kind of like, all right, whatever. And Eva Mendes is just, she is like as the
She is.
like kind of undercover like sex appeal of the movie or whatever. But really, as much as I do like some of the effects, also one thing that really like stood out to me, and I know Dan as well, is the police in this. Like they
so dumb.
literally run into each other in every which way. They're like literally like the most idiotic
They're
portrayal
incompetent.
of police that I've seen in like a movie in a very long
Oh,
time,
yeah.
maybe
They are
ever.
pretty dumb, you're right.
So
They're going like 10 miles an hour and they
stuff
can't
like
stop in
that
time.
really just takes away, just makes it way too over the top. It's just not nearly as good and is a huge step down.
It's easily, for me, the worst of the franchise, especially when you compare it to the first one, which, you know, I think we all agree. I know Justin didn't like it as much as us, but I think we could all agree it's at least kind of setting the template for something. And this was not it. Like, it's so awful. And the plot is pointless. You're absolutely right. The villain is just so terrible. I think Tyrese and Ludacris got much better with their acting as the series went on and as they got a little bit older. And, you know, they each did a couple other movies as well before they came back. But, yeah, this is just, it's pathetic.
Well, I think Too Fast, Too Furious should serve as a very important lesson to Hollywood studios. If you cannot get the lead actor back, please don't make the movie. Too Fast, Too Furious basically plays out like a really dumb spin-off no one ever wanted. I know people who loved Paul Walker way back when, but he's not meant to be the guy front and center for this movie. And to play devil's advocate briefly with you, Aidan, I hadn't seen Too Fast, Too Furious in its entirety before this, so the entire time when I was getting ready for this episode, I was thinking, when does this character first pop up? And they try to make him both a comic relief character and also try and have this whole like prison subplot that's kind of interesting, but develops strangely over the course of it. I still don't know how to feel about him. I like him better in this than I did in his later stuff where he just basically became, I'm a goofy distraction. The action's a lot more clunkier. The villain's not particularly memorable. Nobody's really that standoutish. It's just unnecessary. It's got a couple decent action sequences, and I did enjoy Ludacris, but that's honestly about it.
I mean, I enjoyed seeing Ludacris because at the time he was Ludacris the rapper. I mean, I guess
Not
he still,
Ludacris
I
the
guess he
actor.
still is, but like,
Yeah.
you know,
The Fro was a surprise.
the Fro
Yeah.
was a huge surprise. Although he had that in one of his videos. I remember he was waking up in the morning and he had that big fro as he got out of bed.
I'm
I
not
feel
used
like he
to
needs
that.
to come back.
Fro.
Saturday video, I think it was.
Huh. I don't think I saw it, actually.
But here again with the music,
Yeah.
right from the time, which sort of fell off as the series went on. Like, especially in the later movies,
They kind of do away with that.
they kind of do away completely. Maybe because they realized, looking back, like, oh, this is kind of dated if we put in like all this era-specific music.
It's also kind of, I think, getting away from the general subculture of the whole street racing thing.
You're right.
And the whole car thing, because that was a bigger part in the earlier movies, and I guess that to be cool and hip, they try to have the coolest songs there. And one of the strengths is they also try to make them more all-encompassing movies. I mean, they're still silly action movies, but they try to get a little less restrained from that. This one, though, I thought it was all over the place, really. I did like the fact, though, that it wasn't trying to repeat the first movie. It actually was trying to do something different. That was a bit of a surprise. I like Tyrese, I think, later on, as the funny guy. I think he's funnier. But I did like the fact that he had something a little more established here. I thought his character was interesting. I kind of liked his relation with Paul Walker. I disagree that he's not necessarily the best choice for the leading man, because he's sort of was the main character for a while, so I guess they could kind of understand that. But one thing I will say is that, for me, even when I knew nothing about Fast and the Furious, I didn't know Paul Walker. Vin Diesel. I just thought, Vin Diesel, when I automatically think Fast and Furious, even though I'd never seen a movie, Vin Diesel.
I'm the exact same way.
And I know, I guess is Paul Walker... I think that they're maybe on fairly even in terms of their... Aidan, what do you know? Like, in terms of, like, how they're iconically known, because I know obviously they play off each other, but for me, and it just seems like Vin Diesel, maybe it's because I like him more. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they both are kind of like co-leads. I think, especially for a little while there, Paul Walker being in almost every one of them kind of gave him a little bit of an edge, even though Too Fast, Too Furious was of questionable quality. Like, still, just being in, like, basically, like, more than Vin Diesel kind of gave him a little bit of a, like, upper edge and, like, kind of the head of the franchise.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. He's the most established, and it kind of goes with his story for the most part. Well, but I feel like they kind of realized later on, okay, we need to bring Vin Diesel back.
Yeah, but do you know why that was, I think? Because Vin got a lot more famous. He was doing the Riddick movies. He was doing other projects.
Triple
Paul
X.
Walker, other than Brick Mansions, I can't tell you one thing he's ever done other than these movies.
He did do a couple other movies later on, but even that was later on in the Fast and Furious time, I think. But I guess that's true. Vin Diesel was already getting more established and more popular.
So I feel like, that's maybe why I also thought of Vin much more than Paul. Like, when Paul Walker passed away, I knew he was part of the franchise, but even after I'd seen 6, I didn't immediately think, oh, that's
Paul
Brian.
Walker.
Yeah, like, I knew Vin Diesel.
Yeah, I've always associated with Vin Diesel, but I just thought this movie was definitely a lot clunkier. I also didn't like the villain. I thought the plot was pretty much throwaway. I also felt like they were trying to be a little too goofy and just so immersive in the whole street racing thing, even though it wasn't really as integral to the plot. But I still found some things about it kind of enjoyable, I guess.
I'd like to ask you this, though, Aidan. You said that this was the first PG-13 movie you've ever seen. You really loved it. Let's go rush out and see number 1.
Yeah.
Looking at it now,
yeah,
10 years later, what are your thoughts?
It definitely, like, has gone down a lot. Back then, there was a lot of sequences. Like, I mentioned the car injection scene, but stuff like, also, the scene with the rat, I'll say. Stuff like that was, like,
I forgot
crazy,
about that.
like, nothing I'd ever seen in a movie before. Like, it was just, like, so cool. But definitely now that I've seen hundreds, thousands of more movies and just gotten a better perspective on plot and what's a good action movie and whatnot, it definitely lowered my grade substantially. And I honestly hadn't seen it before we rewatched them in probably at least 3 or 4 years. So there was still a bit of a nostalgic factor before I watched it, and it kind of did. Like, there's still, like, those good feelings, but it definitely lowered it watching it again.
That makes sense.
Okay.
What would your grade be now for it?
It would be a D+.
Okay, it is a D for me. Justin?
It is a D-.
Wow.
It is a C-.
Oh, okay.
That was okay.
Joe's a little bit higher on the end.
Yeah, I thought it was entertaining enough.
Okay.
I actually contemplated giving it a C- because I did like the entertainment factor and stuff. But what kept it at a D+ for me was just the fact that it has no relation to anything else in the franchise, and I think that kind of like lowered it for me for sure.
I can definitely agree with that. I didn't think about that quite as much, but I think that the thing that bumped it up a little more for me was I did like the interplay between Walker and Tyrese. I did like that whole connection.
All right, well, let's move into Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, and Justin's going to talk about that.
Well, speaking of little to no continuity,
Yay! Almost as bad.
as I mentioned in my prior review with the fact that we didn't get Vin Diesel back, this one says let's not have either of them back for the most part, and just add in a new character.
Talk about spin-offs, right?
A high schooler from Arizona, the oldest looking high schooler I have ever seen.
It's like 30, right?
Looks like he's 30.
Oh,
named
man.
Sean, is a little street punk who has an incredible gift for driving, until his incident on the streets drive him off, quite literally, to Tokyo
He's that bad.
to live off with his father, and ends up, as you could probably assume, in the street racing scene again. When he gets horribly defeated, he gets the person that he ends up owing, Han, who I know is a favorite of Dan's, and teaches him the art of drifting. You may have noted, listeners, that when Dan asked me what movies I had seen before, I mentioned 3, 5, and 6. Why 3? Well, I happened to catch this in a hotel one night when I was out of town, and I just thought it was so horrifyingly bad, I just couldn't look away. And I honestly still stand on that opinion. It's a movie that I truly do love to hate. Whereas the others sort of have some sort of basis in the storyline, the fact that this is just a pointless knockoff, it basically plays out like Fast and the Furious fan fiction.
It kind of does, actually. You're not wrong about that.
That's essentially dead on arrival. It's a complete and utter mess. There are a couple interesting editing tricks here and there. The drifting later on is a lot of fun, but it's just a ridiculously dumb movie.
Justin, I'm going to have to offer a different perspective here. Now, I do agree with you that it definitely goes off the rails quite a bit, but I'd heard a lot about Tokyo Drift from Fast and Furious fans, and it seems to be a more divisive film. Some people seem to think it's the worst, and some people seem to love it. So I was curious what my opinion would be on it. I do agree with you. It's really stupid. I think the worst thing about it is that the main character sucks.
He's awful.
The actor is not good.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I know that he's supposed to go through some growth, but when this guy watches this kid get bullied and does nothing about it, and I'm supposed to think he's cool, there's really nothing redeeming about it to begin with. However, once they go to Japan and you kind of get immersed in the whole street racing scene there, and of course it's got some crime elements with the Yakuza, I have to admit, I kind of started to dig it. It was still silly, it was still stupid, and it was not really related, but I did like Han's character. I liked the whole relationship, trying to make him a better person, being a better driver. But this is, like the rest of them, a movie you're not supposed to take too seriously, but really going off the rails in a, not necessarily in the action, but just the overall atmosphere. So it's a mixed bag for me.
For this one, I did think the drifting, as Justin mentioned, was sort of cool. It was a little bit of an interesting world. It was a little bit different. But really, that's one of the few positive things I can say about this movie. Now, as the franchise is going on, and there's the tie-in that sort of works, but the more you think about it, the worse of a tie-in it really is to make it part of the series.
For lack of a better word.
And the ending where a character from a majority of the franchise pops in was a very cool way to end it, and was definitely probably my favorite scene, which is kind of says something about the movie there.
Oh, yeah.
Messed it up the last minute. It's tolerable.
Besides that, as you guys mentioned, Lucas Black is just an awful actor.
God, you're
His
so bad.
delivery,
Horrible.
his accent, just everything is just awful. And when I heard he was going to be in the 7th one, I know Dan and me were like, oh, we hope he's not in it that much. And thank God he wasn't.
Like
Thank
a
God he
scene,
had
yeah.
one scene.
Thank God.
Because his acting, we were like, well, maybe it would at least get better if he's going to be in 7 more. And
Got
it
worse.
didn't in that
Yeah.
scene.
Got
It
worse.
was
No, it
awful.
got so much
Oh,
worse.
it was so
Because he hasn't
bad.
been in anything in 6 years
42.
because he's awful.
And besides that, though, just the dialogue in general, Bow Wow coming in to be like, I guess, the ludicrous in a way of
Yeah.
this film.
Yeah.
His lines
Yeah.
were all awful.
Pop
All he
a
did was
rapper.
just sell random, like,
Stuff to
stolen
people on the
merchandise.
streets.
Like, his character made
Doesn't
no
make any
sense.
It's like, yeah, I can sell anything to anybody. He sold like chains and sneakers. Like, what?
Yeah, he was just awful. And then I do like Han's character as it has gone on, but seeing it when it first came out in the theaters, when certain things happen to him, it doesn't have nearly as much of an impact as later in the franchise when his character has become more developed. It was kind of just like, oh, he seems like he's a nice guy, but what do I care what happens to him?
Right.
That definitely like hurt it some for me too, especially since, like I said, I saw it right away. I saw the first two. I was a lot younger. I liked them, and this was just a real disappointment right away back then.
Oh
Just
wow!
is not a good
Even
movie.
as like an 11-year-old or
Yeah,
whatever,
I was just like, oh,
that
well,
says
okay.
something.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, when they reintroduced Sean in Furious 7, I was thinking for a second, maybe if they gave him more to do, he might become a more interesting character. Nope, they don't want to do anything with him. I feel like if you're going to make this movie canon, give it more basis.
Well, it is canon, but barely. They want to make it another element, I guess, because there were cool aspects to it. They wanted to interplay there, but they've barely gone back to it since the only real positive connection from it was Han, who becomes a bigger part later. So
Yeah, I would say this is probably the worst of the franchise, but for the brilliance of having it chronologically placed after 6. Now, I can see if you're watching it as it came out, Aidan, 1, 2, and then this piece of garbage. What do you know what's going on? But the way we watch them chronologically, it has way more impact. I can't imagine that the filmmakers in 100 years knew that they were going to do this ahead of time, because at the time the franchise was dying on the vine. But that they did, and they saw this Han character and then put him in subsequent features after his character was already done, I thought was kind of clever.
kind of worked out well.
You're right. It's pretty threadbare to actually make it part of the series and have it connect. But
It's technically what it is, though.
More or less.
right, because of that, that is technically what it is. I feel like if you watch these in release order, this is just, I mean, it's an F of a movie. It's awful. Lucas Black can ruin everything.
I think the biggest problem with this movie was if you just had a better character to follow.
Yeah, the character stinks, and Bow Wow replacing Ludacris also isn't great. But I have to admit, the drifting was kind of cool. I do admit that it was interesting to put it in like a new venue, a new scene, not having it be the same type of street racing. It was kind of interesting based upon that. So, Justin, what's your grade for Tokyo Drift?
It is a glorious F.
Yeah, you didn't care about the chronological part.
As you guys know, I have some particular views when it comes to guilty pleasure status. So
True.
this movie's a C.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Pretty funny.
This for me is a D, and it's my least favorite of the series.
Okay. Well, Joe, I'm with you, not with a C, but that it is slightly better for me than 2, and I give it a D+.
Okay.
Justin, let's talk about Fast and Furious.
Not to be confused with the Fast and the Furious.
No.
After 2 random spin-off sequels, we finally got a movie that got everyone back. And to further expand on what you mentioned, Dan, after Tokyo Drift, 4, 5, and 6 took place before it. This time we have Dominic Toretto and company back on their usual hijinks when they discover that Han's garage has been raided and they have to go into hiding. While in hiding, Dom gets a call from his sister Mia that his girlfriend Letty has been murdered and goes on a quest for vengeance to find out why. Now, Joe and I are bound to be fighting about this movie because I rather enjoyed this one. I thought after so many movies of a ridiculously wooden performance from Diesel, we finally got some sort of motivational drive out of him in this interesting sort of kind of revenge story. It's ridiculous, as the later movies gradually become, but I also feel like because it's not 2 hours and 20 minutes long like 5, 6, and 7 were, it relatively keeps moving and it never really slows down. I was always invested in its ridiculousness and where we would be heading next. The acting's still dumb, but it's kind of an entertaining dumb for me.
I can't agree about the Vin Diesel. I thought of everybody from that first one, I thought he was okay. I mean, he was more of a standout to me than Paul Walker or anybody else in that first movie. And I thought of all of them, until we get, to certain other actors that come in later, like The Rock, I thought he's probably the best actor in one of the lead roles.
I actually think that his acting was okay in the first one. I thought he was a lot more wooden here, though, to be perfectly honest. I think it's one of the more wooden performances that I've seen him give. I will admit that this was the first movie I saw with no knowledge in regards to the rest of the series, so that probably impacted my opinions on it originally. I still don't think it's very good. I think it's okay. I did like some of the return of the older characters, and it was good to see them have their dynamic. And I think it's important because it kind of established the future of the rest of the franchise to kind of step in the right direction. But by itself, I thought that it was all right.
Aidan, what did you think?
Well, this one I was really excited for when it first came out. After the disappointment of the third one, just the thought of the original cast being back together, it just seemed like nothing could go wrong, and it would just be amazing and everything I'd hoped for. But it wasn't, honestly. I think the movie's okay. I really like the beginning action sequence, and the ending I think is great and saves it a lot for me. I think it's a great ending and a great just cliffhanger to get you excited for what direction the fifth one would go in. But first off, this is where there really starts to be a lack of street racing. They were racing through the desert and through the tunnels, and there was still racing components. But
That was pretty good, actually.
I was going to say, I don't consider that a bad thing.
I respect your guys' opinion, but for me, it just didn't work as well as other ones. I didn't like that as much. One of my biggest problems, though, is the villain and the twist, if you want to call it that, I thought was pretty much you could see it from a mile away.
Yeah.
You could tell right away. And that was really kind of disappointing. I thought that was really not pulled off well.
To offer a counterpoint, though, the Fast and the Furious franchise only seems to have 2 modes with quote-unquote twists: glaringly obvious or completely random.
He's probably right about that. One thing it does have the variation, though, is quality of villains, though.
I'll
That
go with
is true.
There are some better
That's
villains
true.
than others.
I would agree with that. But another thing, I know I'm kind of getting on the storytelling methods, and I know that's not necessarily what the franchise is about. But one thing that really bugged me is I feel like Brian's character has the exact same arc as the first one. I feel like he's a cop. He decides that he doesn't want to be a cop anymore.
Yeah.
The fact that they even let him become a cop again, and then they're like,
That
oh,
didn't make any
well,
sense.
he did the same thing.
That's the one thing I've always found maddening about the entire franchise as a whole is everyone seems to be able to get away with anything at the switch of a button.
It's true. They are very forgiving in this univerce for everybody.
That is true.
It's like, but then again,
We can get kicked out of the country, but we can come back.
we saw how dumb the cops were, though, so maybe that doesn't really matter.
That's very true.
That's true.
But I think that's really the biggest thing for me is just some of the things like the twists in Brian's arc just really didn't do it for me. But I do think the beginning and ending action sequences are good. And I did like Michelle Rodriguez's character. That was pretty interesting how it played out through like the middle section there.
That was a good comeback, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting way to go with her character because when you see the original cast, you don't necessarily think, oh, well, she's going to get killed off. That's kind of what you wouldn't expect if you're reuniting the original cast. You think they might want to keep them around for a little bit.
Well,
But
they learned.
Essentially, yeah. I do think this movie is not really that much better than 2. It is nice to see the original cast back in action, but it is a bad follow-up to 1, just in the sense that it is kind of the same movie. And Aidan said about how Paul Walker's arc is basically the same. I mean, he is going through the same types of things.
He's a better actor here, though.
He's definitely learned to act a little more. I'll give him that. But it's less entertaining because of that, and because of the less street racing. I think that's okay, but yeah, the twist of this is just horrible. I could see it coming from a mile away, and I liked the actor a lot that played the villain, but it was just so obvious. For me, this is sort of not that much better than 2 or 3. It is nice to see the cast back together. I liked Michelle Rodriguez's whole thing. But you actually hit on my favorite part, Aidan. The end of the movie, that cliffhanger, kind of saves the movie. Not enough maybe to make it enjoyable, but it makes it relevant maybe. You do want to kind of see where they're taking everything.
I'm not entirely sure how I felt about the cliffhanger because I think it's the first time, I think the only time the franchise has ever played with that. Unless you want to count post-credit sequence with 6. But I thought it worked. Like I said, I feel like instead of being 2 hours and 25 minutes, it keeps moving. And I feel like the racing sequences, while they're not front and center like in the last ones, which I personally don't think they needed in the first place, but that's irrelevant.
It's kind of the basis for
The first one,
series.
yes. The other one's not so much. But I mean, this one I felt like sort of was a good stepping stone for the later movies to come.
What grade would you give it?
I'd go B-.
Joe?
Slightly less entertaining than the first one, C+.
for me, I agree with Justin. I think it's a good stepping stone, but I don't think it's anywhere near the full potential of especially what I thought it could be, having the original cast back together. I'm going to go with a C for this one.
It's a C- for me. Just a hair above number 2, honestly, and Tokyo Drift. I'm surprised about your B-, Justin.
For the first time, the series is actually relatively focused and is trying to accomplish something, which I liked.
I think it accomplished something in the first movie. I think some of the core elements work there. It's just kind of retreading old ground, basically.
Yeah, I think that's why I did not like it nearly as much as 1. But we're going to pause from the reviews of each movie to take a look now at our top 5 characters. And this can be anybody in any of the films. Good or bad, major or minor, doesn't matter. Joe, why don't we start with you for the... just go through the whole list, 5 through 1, on your top 5 Fast and Furious characters.
All right. I stayed primarily focused on the main ones because I honestly think they're some of the best characters. Which is why it might be funny that my number 1B5 would be Tyrese's character. I honestly thought he was funny. I always looked forward to seeing him later on. I enjoyed him. I know Justin hates him, but
He really does.
He livens my day. I don't know. But he's my number 5. Brian O'Connor, that'd be Paul Walker's character. I actually think that he is charismatic. He's likable. I like his overall arc that he goes with throughout the series. I think he does have some decent things he's struggling with, and I really like his relations with Dom. I like how he gets integrated in the whole, concept of like working on the right side of the law or not, and then his eventually getting a family and having to deal with that as well, and getting pulled back into the life. It's pretty cool. I do think that one reason he's so low on the list, though, is that he does get kind of overshadowed by other characters as the series goes on. Like, by 7, he's like, basically he's there, but it's like, it's not quite as big a deal.
Well, he did die before 7 came out.
I was going to say, 7 was
So
basically, let's find a way to
yeah.
shift him out, so.
I know.
It's a little bit of a...
I know that's a little bit point, but I
Yeah.
think even before that, it was kind of already being overshadowed by Vin Diesel. I've always felt that. So number 3, I think you'll like, Dan. It's actually Han Solo. Just like the cool character in regards to just being the master of the teacher. I liked the drifting thing. I thought it was really corny. He was definitely one of the best things about Tokyo Drift for me, and I did like the fact that they interjected him later on. He was a good character. I really liked him. Number 2 is Dominic Toretto. Because it's Vin Diesel. I do admit, though, I like the fact he's attached to this character, and I like the relation he has with Brian and with Michelle Rodriguez's character. And I like the fact that he's got loyalty to his crew and his sense of family. I think there is something genuine about that probably speaks to a lot of fans of this whole general lifestyle. And I like the character and his relation to the rest of the series, even though I don't think it's the best character that he's ever played. I still like Riddick more. I still like Xander Cage more. But I do understand why people have attached to him. He is a good character here. And my number 1, what do you guys think it is?
I would think it's The Rock.
Luke Hobbs, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much I love the fact they interjected this guy in here. He was a great antagonist. Spoilers for 5. Really, really pumped a lot of energy, as he usually does into the franchise. And I really like his character. I think he's a lot of fun. I think he shows some range here. And I just loved his relation with Vin Diesel. That fight there is pretty awesome, but I won't get too much into that. But Luke Hobbs, The Rock.
All right. Very good. Aidan, how about for you on the top 5?
All right. My number 5 is Paul Walker as Brian O'Connor.
Low on the list again, I see.
Yeah. Paul Walker, to me, his character, like I said, I've had problems with some of his arcs and stuff like that. I respect him as an actor, but I just feel like he's the straight man, and he does have some family things and stuff like that. But I don't like you even mentioned earlier, like you don't think of Paul Walker when you think of Fast and Furious. I don't think he.
No,
I still don't.
Yeah, like
really
I don't
don't.
necessarily think he adds so much to the movie. I don't think he's one of like the better characters. I'm not dying to see what happens to Paul Walker when I go to see the next film. I don't know. His character for me, it's essential to the story, but it's just not one of my favorites. But I do appreciate how it ties in. And definitely some of his arcs in the later films I enjoy.
I guess it's kind of like he's a character that you kind of need to be there, but he's not the most essential element.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. My number 4 is Han, played by Sung Kang. I do enjoy Han. I think he's a really likable character. I like some of his romance elements with Giselle. I think it's kind of like adds a bit of sweetness every once in a while. I think it's well done. I like his character a lot. It would maybe even be a little higher on my list, but I feel like they didn't necessarily give him as much to do in like 5 or 6, even though like they brought him back. I just feel like he was not one of the major supporting characters. I feel like he was just kind of
a side character.
Yeah, but I feel like people like Ludacris and Tyrese definitely get a lot more screen time than he did in those films. Number 3, to Justin's chagrin, is Tyrese Gibson as Roman Pierce.
He's funny, right?
Right in my heart, Aidan. Right in my heart.
I just really like him. He works for me in his comedy. Like Joe said, he kind of like brightens my day, or whatever you would like to
Gives
call
some
it.
levity, yeah.
Like it just, his comedy works for me, and it's a nice change from all the action and all the everything going around. I just think he's a fun character, and his lines, I'm always excited to see what crazy thing he'll say, or like how he'll just talk his way out of some situation. I just really enjoy his character.
Does he?
No. sort of half successfully.
Number 2 for me is The Rock, or Dwayne Johnson as Hobbs. I just really love his, especially in the last one. I wish he would have been in there more.
I know, right?
I just love his like delivery and his not serious take, but he can still do like the crazy fight sequences, and like everyone's like said, he's so charismatic. You love when he's on the screen. He's just entertaining to watch, and I just think he was a great addition, and definitely really helped it become what it did from 5 onward. And then number 1 for me is Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel. Just being a lifelong fan of the series, I just love his character. Like you said, one of the things I actually really like about him is I'm a very loyal person, I like to think, and I definitely identify with his loyalty to like the people that he like cares about. I think he has just basic principles, but he sticks to them, and I just enjoy that in his character. And really, as much as I like his character, he's kind of the head of the franchise. He helped bring it back.
Yeah.
He did a lot behind the scenes
it.
as well. Like, he pulled a lot of strings, and I believe he's producer on at least a couple of them.
I think he started producing in 4.
Yeah.
Well, one thing about Vin Diesel, he in general in all his franchises, he seems to like his fans. He wants to make the fans happy.
But I just really like his character. He's the figurehead. He just holds everyone together in a way, and he's definitely my favorite character of the franchise.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my number 5 is also Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker. I really almost didn't put him on the list because I really like Michelle Rodriguez's character of Letty. I think she has a very good arc, and I love her relationship with Dom. But you guys kind of said it. I mean, he is sort of
The glue.
The glue that, him and Vin Diesel are sort of the glue that holds the series together. And one really is a two-hander movie. I mean, it's not Dom's story, it's not Brian's story. It is both of them. Yes, okay, Joe, he's not in 7 that much.
True.
You're right.
Not quite.
But, I mean, I think, the fact that he was the only one that came back for 2 even.
Yeah.
He really is a good heart of the franchise. So,
But who came back for 43, though?
Vin.
See?
But only at the very end.
But true loyalty would be to
Only
come
at
back
the
for
end.
3. That's
Well,
right. Yeah.
he knew a turd when he read it. All right, my number 4 is a villain, actually.
Oh.
I decided to mix it up a little bit and put a villain on the list, and that is Owen Shaw, played by Luke Evans, who we're going to get to in Fast and Furious 6, and he appears briefly in 7 as well,
was good.
who is all about his brother, Deckard Shaw. This was the first time that I actually saw a villain in this franchise that I thought, okay, now here's a villain. The first few villains were just not good or obvious or whatever. Here we see that clearly the franchise is going in this more action-based direction, not just about street racing, and so they got an appropriate villain for that. My number 3 is Han, and Joe, believe it or not, his last name is pronounced Solo.
Solo?
Yes, his name's Han Solo. It actually makes me like his character less, but I just found that out today, so I'm all right with it. And that's played by Sung Kang.
I was going to make a joke about it earlier, but now I don't have to.
Yes.
That's actually...
Isn't that awful?
I didn't draw that connection. That's,
Yeah. So I'm glad to see that Han showed up on both of your top 5s. I mean, I feel like he is a very underrated character. When you think of this franchise, nobody ever thinks of Han. They think, if not of the 2 leads, they think of Ludacris, or they think of Tyrese, or The Rock, or...
I don't know, though, because I remember talking to some people about it. One thing that comes up a lot is the fact that people were upset Han died, and I think that's one reason why
bring him back.
Tokyo Drift is remembered. Maybe they'll bring him back again, I don't know, but...
But I think Aidan made a really good point. To just see number 3 on its own merits, and never have seen Han in 4, 5, or 6, who cares?
Maybe
to be
not.
honest.
But because they added it in there, they do care. So,
I know.
like you
They
said,
did.
so
it brought it back around. So I was glad to see that. My number 2 is Dom Toretto, Vin Diesel. I mean, this guy is awesome. He is my favorite character that Vin plays. I mean, now granted, I've only seen one Riddick movie, which I didn't care for. I do like Triple X, Joe, but this is the Vin Diesel franchise, and it will go down in history as the Vin Diesel franchise. I think Dom's a great character. And Aidan, you're absolutely right. I feel like his sense of family and his sense of bringing everyone into the fold and making sure his buddies are always with him, his loyalty is really what gives the character and the whole franchise, honestly, its heart. And my number 1, of course, is Hobbs, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I love him in every movie. I think he is one of the most charismatic performers, and I call him a performer, Justin, because I know he's probably not a great actor. I know that. But he is an entertainer and a performer, and that goes back, obviously, to his roots in wrestling. And I think, more than anything, The Rock is what injected life into this franchise, starting with number 5.
I would say Vin Diesel saved it, and The Rock just took it on the
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Justin, what's your top 5?
I want to kick mine off with an honorable mention, and that would be Owen's quote-unquote, in the words of The Rock, big bad brother, Deckard Shaw.
Jason Statham.
I say that because I feel like Deckard had so much more to do than Owen. Owen had like 2 or 3 scenes. Deckard is always on the attack, and it's awesome for that reason.
Yeah, he is.
It's kind of what he does, though.
My number 5 is one I'm surprised was not on your list, Joe, and that is Mr. Nobody, played by the great Kurt Russell.
That is true. You're right. He was a good one.
It's like Aiden's least favorite part of 7.
Well,
We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
Well, I will say this much, Justin. I actually really do like Kurt Russell. You're right. I did like him a lot in that movie, but I felt like he was in it for such a small amount of time. He doesn't really intend to be as a Fast and Furious character yet to the same level of importance as the other ones. If he comes back for the 8th one, which I've heard he might,
I don't see why not.
Maybe. But that's why it wasn't on my list.
But for me, I feel like what really has kept the Fast and Furious franchise alive and well has been the fact that it's been going in all these sort of bonkers directions, and you either are on board or you're not.
Yeah.
And I feel like his character truly does emphasize that. Even in the brief amount of time, it's like, hey, I'm going to give you a garage. Have fun, kids.
It was pretty good.
Tej. Maybe it's just that I really like Ludacris, but I think he's also in that sort of bonkers character that just has fun with it and keeps getting more and more entertaining. He's kind of how I wish Tyrese's character would be. We're not entirely sure what he does.
He's a smart guy.
He's a smart guy, but he starts off as like this racing host, and then somehow he joins the FBI. We're not quite sure how.
Yeah, like you said, it
because they'll apparently take anyone.
Just accept what happens. Yeah.
His only explanation really is, I had a past life or something of that sort.
Yeah, that's the only thing he ever says.
That's the only explanation you'll ever get of how I became a super hacker. But
maybe we'll get the Tej spin-off. I don't know.
It's because I got a better script. That's the answer.
And I mean, it's hard to go wrong with a glorious, ridiculous afro from the second movie that needs to come back.
That's definitely a plus. I considered him for my top 5 actually.
My number 3 is Dominic Toretto.
Oh, a little low.
Little low. Is definitely an interesting Vin Diesel character. I do like how his character grows over time. I do like the loyalty motif. I wish they would use it more. But he definitely is the glue of the series. And my number 2 is Han.
Oh.
Yeah. Han getting love on everybody's list.
He may be a side character, but he is a glorious side character. We see him in the worst one. He's probably the best thing about it. But I mean, his best moments truly do come in 4 and 5, where honestly, even though he's just subplots, he does manage to steal the show. You never stop caring about him.
That is true.
And my number 1, big shocker here, Hobbs.
Ah.
Wow.
Such a welcome addition to the Fast and the Furious franchise. I think you're spot on. He's a great performer. He's a lot of fun. He's very charismatic, and he plays off Vin Diesel like that. And I honestly live in fear of them ever actually successfully doing the spin-off centered on him. Because I don't want the magic to die because his character's no longer in it.
Yeah, I feel like he's good with the crew.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
He fits in. Which actually brings us to our next film, and that is Fast 5. This is the one that changed everything. Justin Lin returned to direct it, who started with number 4. And it not only takes the series from being just about fast cars and street racing that we sort of got hints of in number 4, but made it a full-on action movie with gunplay, a heist plot. And we really see the merging of the two casts here. Michelle Rodriguez appears in a photo and flashback only, but other than that, all of the cast members who returned for number 4 are back. Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, Jordana Brewster. They merge with Tyrese and Ludacris for number 2. But the highlight is that this is the first film with The Rock as Hobbs. There's also a whole host of new characters that only appear in this installment, kind of inconsequential. But basically, this kicks off exactly where the last movie left off. Mia and Brian are breaking Dom out of a prison bus, this great cliffhanger that we said about, and they escape to Rio. In the process, a couple of DEA agents get killed, so Hobbs and his team are sent in to capture the family. The antagonist here is drug lord Hernan Reyes, who is after Dom and the guys. Because of that, he steps on Hobbs' team as well, so the Fast crew and Hobbs' crew all team up to battle Reyes, and the big showstopper scene is that massive car chase involving the dragging of a bank safe with $100 million in it all over town. This is a really good start in upping the ante, but the dialogue here is terrible. And the series isn't sure how to get from point A, which is the racing, to point B, which is an actual legitimate action franchise. I think it's an okay start. I think sort of maybe how, Justin, you were saying that you felt 4 was. I feel like this is the bridge movie between the two, but it's still not quite all there. The Rock has some particularly ridiculous lines, which sort of carry on, but I think in this installment we're expected to take them a little bit more seriously because the entire tone of the movie is a little more serious. But yeah, I mean, it's not a bad movie. It's like almost there. Justin, what'd you think?
Well, this is the start of what I like to call the 2 steps forward, 1 giant step back for the franchise. We got Hobbs. I don't think anyone's ever going to say a bad word about that.
No.
Nope.
But the bad was it started this whole sequels becoming these overstuffed epics. And I don't think that was ever the direction the Fast and the Furious franchise should have gone. Largely because it's more or less just sound and fury signifying nothing. I couldn't agree more, Dan. The dialogue is atrocious.
Horrible.
Really, really bad. And I mean, they're really having fun with it. And I mean, it's entertaining even despite the horrible delivery, but it ruins the compelling action and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. I will give it points for the fact that I like the fact the franchise is finally starting to have more direct continuity instead of a bunch of pointless spin-offs nobody ever wanted in the first place.
Yeah.
But I just feel like it would have been such a better film if this was like cut in half and they just made it much more focused.
It is too long, and I said this when we talked about Fast 7 on the show, but I don't think any of them need to be more than 2 hours.
Well, I actually think that this film kind of is definitely a good step in the right direction. I do agree The Rock coming in was a big boost for it. I like the fact that it was actually trying to take itself a little more seriously, but I do disagree, though, that I think that kind of getting bigger and badder is kind of one of the things that is kind of getting people more hooked into the franchise, is that they're constantly trying to outdo themselves, and it gets more and more over the top. And I kind of like that. I mean, it is kind of why people keep coming back for more. I love the chase scene with the bank vault towards the end. That whole sequence was great. I love the fight between Vin Diesel and The Rock. I thought that actually was pretty good. Some decent choreography there. And I just thought the whole storyline was actually pretty decent. I liked the villain. I do agree the dialogue's really crummy, and some of the delivery is pretty bad. Mm-hmm. But to be fair, that's most of these movies, so I don't know. It kind of varies. So it didn't bother me quite as much. Overall, I thought it was pretty enjoyable. I thought it was about on the same level as the first one.
Aidan?
All right. I definitely agree with everything everyone's saying about the action. I thought that the vault scene is great. It's a great end to the movie, a finale that people remember, and that's what they think.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
5's the vault one.
Yeah.
That's what they think of.
The vault one.
And it's like, it definitely is a great sequence, and I love The Rock and Vin Diesel's fight. I felt like that was something like when you saw they were going to be in the same movie, you're like, they gotta fight at some point.
To, right?
Like, it's going to be awesome. They gotta fight. And one that people didn't really mention is I really like the hijacking at the beginning too. I thought that was a good scene. The whole train sequence I thought it was entertaining to watch.
Oh yeah, that was good.
That's true.
And like I feel like that one gets a little overshadowed, but it is a good start to the movie, I believe. And of course The Rock's in here and really just breathes some life into it that it needed. And I do agree that the villain was
pretty good, right?
good, especially compared to Braga, who I had my problems with in the last one, and I really didn't like. I thought he was definitely a step up in the villain category. But some of my problems are definitely the dialogue. The Rock's lines are just... I definitely agree with Dan. Like, they're just not as campy, I feel like, as the other ones. Like, it just seems so much, like, more serious. Like, they actually thought that was, like, something, like...
The way to go.
A tough guy would say. Like, he would, like, talk about, like...
What's my favorite line in that movie? When he asks The Rock if he wants the good news first or the bad news.
He's like, I like my dessert first. And he's like, no, give me the veggies.
Right, then give me the veggies.
Line.
I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, it's funny, but I feel like they were trying for it to be more serious than it was. But one of the things I really don't like about this one is I feel like there are those like cool action sequences, but it is over 2 hours, and I feel like there's a lot of talking in this one compared to other ones. I feel like there's a lot of plot, and I feel like that's not what you're looking for when you go to a Fast and Furious movie.
I kind of disagree because I like the fact that they were actually trying to have more of a plot. I mean, maybe it wasn't the best executed. There's definitely a lot going on. But like I said, I like the fact they were trying to take it a little more seriously. And since they're kind of going into more like this spy, caper, heist thing, you do require some of that.
I feel like it needs balance. But unfortunately, because it's a 2.5 hour movie and some of it's going to... Obviously, we have some great car sequences here. But like you said, a lot of it's very exposition driven, which you could argue overcomplicates the franchise, which at this point has been... Cars crash, mostly coming to some sort of means of let's just find a reason why.
But that's what I mean when I say it had trouble figuring out how to get from point A to point B. I mean, and that's exactly I feel like is the main problem with this movie is that it wants to be taken a little more seriously as a film and not as a series of people racing cars, but it just doesn't know how to do it quite yet.
No, and one just other thing I wanted to throw in there real quick is it doesn't really have any relation to quality of the movie, but I really hate the characters of Leo and Santos, the like Spanish like guys that like help and talk in Spanish.
Yep.
I just feel like they don't add a whole lot. They're not funny to me personally, and I just feel like they didn't need to be in there with the rest of the crew.
Well, I forgot about them, so
Yeah.
I could have just
don't
done
remember
without
them,
them.
actually.
So
Those are definitely two of the people I met when I
Yeah.
said that the new characters are completely inconsequential.
oh, okay, well,
Yeah,
that,
I just
probably not off
they
there.
bug me just because I feel like Tyrese is like a comic relief, as we all mentioned, but I feel like they're kind of additional comic relief that didn't work and wasn't needed in an already too long movie.
So it's basically the Fast and the Furious equivalent of the 90s Disney movies where the sidekicks had sidekicks.
Sidekicks are sidekicks.
Yeah, pretty
Pretty
much
much.
actually. For me, Fast 5 is a C+. Justin?
It is a C for me.
B minus.
C+ for me.
Oh, all right. Well, up next is Fast and Furious 6, and here all of the heroes from Fast 5 return, and we even see the return of Michelle Rodriguez as Letty, who we learn is not in fact dead, but had amnesia and was taken in by the bad guys and basically reprogrammed. Now, we learn that she's dead like towards the end of Fast 5. This is the movie Dom finds out. The cast is basically the same, just with a new bad guy, this Owen Shaw that I mentioned in my top 5. Hobbs persuades Dom here to get the crew together to help him take down Shaw, the mastermind of an international crime syndicate, which basically features bizarro versions of Dom's whole crew. And in return for their help, Dom gets to reunite with Letty, who is now with Shaw's crew. The big closing chase here includes the tank on the freeway and an airplane battle on the world's longest runway. Aidan mentioned that Fast 5 is the one with the bank vault. Everybody remembers this is the incredibly long runway, the airplane sequence, whatever you want to call it. This is, to me, the best of the series. Finally here, the tone of the film conveys that it knows how silly it is, but it's still a great action movie. The corny lines are toned down a little bit, but those that are there are intended to be ridiculous. I think the franchise now understands, okay, we can have it be an action heist kind of franchise, but we can still have a good time with it. There's still massive plot issues, but it just doesn't matter. Like Joe said in 1 or 2 when we were talking about it, you know, this series isn't really focused on how strong is the plot. It's focused on fun. It's focused on the characters, some cool action sequences. And the action sequences do get amped up here with those scenes I mentioned, and so does the entertainment value. I really enjoyed this movie. Justin?
I feel like with 6, it's almost the same deal as 5. It just sort of ups the ante, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. As you mentioned, Joe, the series has always been trying to outdo itself, trying to come up with these crazy stunts that can come into this. There are some unforgettable, almost unintentionally hilarious ones. The new additions are decent, but the most interesting plot points, such as growing relationships and to some regards the villain, even though I think he's underused in this one, I feel like a lot of it's underplayed. We see Hobbs have an assistant this time around, gets maybe 15 minutes of screen time, and then has a very strange out-of-nowhere plot twist. And also the ending is more or less an excuse to explain why some characters are eliminated for the sake of the next movie. I think it's interesting. I think there are some scenes that are a lot of fun with this. I can't say I got bored with it. It's just, once again, with 5, I feel like it's ridiculously overstuffed. But I will give you the fact that it's getting better. It's just it needs to dial it back a little bit, I think.
Yeah, 6 is, I think a step up from 5. But yeah, they're amping everything up. But I will say now, like I mentioned, this is the very first one I ever saw. And I expected nothing. And I came away with it thinking it was, pretty good. But then in context with the rest of the series, I think it's really good. Joe?
I actually feel like it kind of takes the same direction of 5 and just does everything better. I agree there's just a good balance. And I think, yeah, it's stuffed with stuff, but it's what you expect. They got to get all the great action and they got to get the over-the-top stuff in there. I like seeing the characters interact. I liked seeing Letty come back. I thought that whole storyline did actually add some more weight to things with Dom and everything. Overall, I thought it was pretty well balanced, enjoyable. I thought the villain was very good here, but I do agree with Justin. I think he gets a little underused.
I can agree with that.
Though, I mean, he does add to a bigger part of the next one, so maybe he gets to have some of a lengthy stay there in that sense. But overall, I think there were definitely some improvements. It's not perfect, but it is quite an enjoyable movie and easily one of the strongest ones.
Mm-hmm.
What you guys are saying is exactly how I feel about balance. This one is easily my favorite one. And the way I look at it is with the Rock ones, or the more big blockbuster ones. I think 5 has too much talking and not enough action. I think this has like the perfect balance. Then we'll get to 7, but I feel like there's a lot of action and like next to no story. So I kind of feel like this one's the best one. It's the best balance. I feel like they have the action sequences that are cool. If not, they are definitely a little over the top, like the runway sequence. It's a bit ridiculous. But I like that the storytelling in this. I like how she's kind of like can't remember anything, like the whole Letty like storyline. I think that's an interesting emotional aspect kind of to add to get it through the middle and to add to the action. And I know Justin apparently doesn't like it, but I think this is easily the best twist. I think I didn't see it coming, but it kind of worked for me because, especially compared to 4, where I thought the twist was like terrible and I thought a mile away.
It's better than
I kind of enjoyed being surprised by something because you usually aren't surprised, I feel like, in Fast and Furious movies.
Yeah, decent.
It speaks to my point that there are only 2 modes for the Fast and the Furious quote-unquote twists. Obvious or just random. It's like, oh, that person was not that way. Yeah, there was no hint at this ever happening.
But I disagree. I feel like there was hints. If you look back, there was times where that character led The Rock in certain directions, but just seeing it like 2 or 3 times, like there is little things like I picked up. And I think it was... Her character isn't as useless as you think necessarily either. I think her cat fight was really good with Michelle Rodriguez, especially compared to Ronda Rousey in 7.
Yeah,
I think it was about as good of a girl-on-girl fight that they could have in one of these movies. And I liked the writing better. I thought there were some funny moments. It wasn't important to the plot at all, but I thought the scene with Ludacris and The Rock where Ludacris buys all the cars, I thought that was like an entertaining, like funny little aside there. And I do really think that this is the best villain. I think that I don't think that he was in it as little as you think. I feel like he had a lot of sequences where he was talking to Michelle Rodriguez, kind of like, are you going to leave the team? Then he had his action sequences. I feel like he was in it a fair amount, but...
His crew, though, is in it. I mean, yeah, maybe he's personally not in it, but he's the reason for everything happening in this movie. It's true. And that's why I like him.
No. That's not my argument. It's just... I feel like a great villain has to have more presence and not just be, look at my minions.
Well, it depends, though. Sometimes a villain can have presence and not be in the movie too much. Sorry, Silence the Lambs. I know I had... Sorry.
I think it's better that he has a crew, though, because they always have a crew against all the villains no matter what.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's like 7-on-1 or whatever. So I think it's
actually
kind
more
of
balanced,
I think it's a cool aspect to just like have kind of like weirdo versions like Dan said, like their characters.
That's
so it's kind of like more of a fair fight.
That's true.
And I think that adds in with having good balance. But I really did enjoy this one.
Well, for me, Fast and Furious 6 gets a B.
C+.
B.
B+ for me.
Very good. Yeah, I would say easily for me the best of the series. Joe, we already discussed Furious 7 on the show, but let's have it sort of wrap up this.
Well, we did discuss it not too long ago. It's basically a direct sequel to the last one, and essentially, due to the spoilers, the death of the villain in the previous movie, it turns out he has a brother, finds out about Dom's crew, and decides to go after them.
He's not dead, he's in a coma.
Yeah, he's in a coma, but that's all right.
He's basically dead, though, right?
Basically dead.
Well, apparently, the villain in the last movie, he was in a coma. I thought he was dead, so it doesn't really matter. Might as well be dead because Jason Statham, who plays the villain in this movie, his brother, goes after Dom and his crew with a vengeance. And he's literally everywhere. He goes after them completely. And to seek help, Kurt Russell's character, Mr. Nobody, who I believe was CIA, NSA, something like that, decides that he'll aid Dom and his crew if they help him to track down a warlord to get an awesome device that can track anything, anywhere, Dark Knight style, because keep amping it up and get crazier and crazier. And they got to fight a warlord who's Jimon Honsu, in another movie, doing stuff again. But I don't know. I kind of feel about the same way about this one as I reviewed it before. I think that it kind of like the last couple movies, it's trying to amp it up, being really ridiculous, a lot of cool stunts. But I think it ties together a lot of different story arcs here and seeing how these characters have come so far. And I think there definitely is some honest emotional weight to Paul Walker's death. And I actually want to say on a personal note, when we started the show, I used to make fun of Paul Walker all the time. And the fact that he died, I was like, oh, God, will people shut up about him? But, now that I realize that there really is a fandom and there are people that follow these movies for years and like this character and like this actor, and he was apparently a pretty nice guy, I do want to apologize for some of the comments I may have made because I feel like I didn't know. And, people loved it, and I can understand it. I think there is something there. And I will admit, towards the end, even though they had the CGI and everything, I actually got a little teary. I thought that even though I'd only ever seen one movie, which I hated, I actually felt like it had some weight, and that actually really says something. So it's cheesy, it's over the top, but it's got a lot of aspects that I like. Is it technically as good as the last one? Maybe not, but I liked it quite a bit, actually.
Yeah. And I think that emotional weight is, even if you did only see one movie in the series that you didn't like, you can tell, though, how everyone felt about him in that last scene. Like,
There's
you
so
can
much
tell
heart there.
Vin Diesel, man,
You could tell
they were tight.
he wasn't even. I mean, this goes beyond like
Yeah.
that whole last monologue there. It's not him acting. It's
No,
him talking
that's
about
him talking about
the
his
personal
friend.
experience, and like that's you can't deny that. I mean, it might be Fast and the Furious, but it can still have some genuine heart, which I think is a very strong aspect of the whole movie.
Yeah, I agree. Aidan, we know of your issues with Deckard Shaw, so let's hear your take on Furious 7.
All right. Well, I'm going to start off just as we were talking about the Paul Walker tribute. I do think it was well done, and being a fan of the franchise, I thought that it was well done, and it got me a little choked up as well. And I know there were some complaints about the CGI, and while it was pretty obvious, especially when they were across from each other and you could see his face, it didn't really bug me throughout the rest of the film, or it didn't necessarily bug me at the end, but it did stand out towards the end for me. But I feel like they did a pretty good job throughout. I know that was discussed a lot in the when you talked about it previously on the podcast. But I did like the tribute. That was one of my favorite things. And then action sequences, I thought they were definitely entertaining and definitely over the top like you would expect. The cars jumping from the building, and like that's pretty entertaining, and that will stand out to people. And the
planes,
the plane, and them falling down from the plane. I thought those were definitely entertaining, but that part of my problem is there as well, because I feel like the drone at the end in that sequence, like the last two had like big finales, and we're saying like that's what people remember. I feel like they had their like peak early in the movie for a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, and then they kind of just had the drone where.
Well, here's the problem: they had the finale, and then they had the finale to the finale. Mm-hmm. It's like they had two separate ideas, and they didn't know how to get them together.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Aidan's right, because the thing people are going to take away from this movie, other than it's Paul Walker's last movie, is the cars jumping from building to building and the cars jumping out of the planes, which happened. The plane happens very early on,
and the train thing actually on the when they jumped from the planes onto the actual heist on the road.
Right, once they got on
and
the
him
bus.
running up.
Him running up the bus.
On the truck, on the cliff. That whole sequence was good.
But it speaks to the point. These are all things that happen within the first, like,
Half
40
hour,
minutes of the movie.
Give or
And
take.
I just feel like having the drone too is kind of like impersonal. Like they were fighting Jimon Hansu, but like they weren't fighting him. Like he had a drone doing his work, and they never have any actual like, fight between them.
He was a helicopter. He was going after him, I guess.
Yeah, but there wasn't any like big showdown. And
that's kind of the Statham showdown, though.
But my biggest problem with the Statham showdown is they have like a 10-minute at least cutaway mid-fight. And I honestly, by the time they got back to it, I started to think, wait, weren't they fighting? And I feel like that's not good. If you're going to do a cutaway, you shouldn't be like, all right, well, what happened to like the big fight that was going on? I feel like it was just a bit excessive to focus on the drone, which I obviously didn't like a whole lot. And that bugged me for the finale, because it was a good fight. I did enjoy Statham versus Vin Diesel. I thought it was entertaining. But also, as I was saying though earlier, even though the action sequences are good, I think that the story, even though that's not what anyone's looking for by any aspect, I just feel like it was barely there. Like, it was kind of like, in the sequence with Kurt Russell's character, they kind of like gave you a plot summary, and then they spent 2 hours showing you like what they explained in 5 minutes. Like, just like really like over bloated, and kind of was way too long for the lack of plot that they had. And especially coming off 6, which I said was my favorite, I was kind of hoping for a little bit more there, like continuing the story. Because Statham's character, what I don't like is I feel like his sequence at the very beginning where he's there with Owen Shaw and stuff like that, I thought that was really cool. But then after that, I didn't like how he just randomly showed up with no explanation.
Because he's that good, man. He's that good.
It just really bugged me, though. And he was literally like silent pretty much for the whole film. And that kind of bugged me, like, as a villain. Like,
he's ominous, Aidan.
He's ominous, but it just didn't do it for me, because I expected him to be more like Owen Shaw, which I know isn't a good thing necessarily for everyone, but to me that would have been...
That's why he had Hansu, because he'd say all kinds of stuff.
Well, Owen has buddies. True. Deckard is a one-man army.
Yeah, he just didn't do it for me, but the thing that bugged me the most was Han died, and then his character was brought in because he was trying to kill everyone. But he didn't do any of his goals. Yeah, he showed up and caused a bunch of mayhem, but no other characters died, like, in the rest of the movie. And I feel like if that's, like, his main, like, he's coming in to kill everyone, and he doesn't kill anyone in the movie, like, I feel like he's not that good of a villain. Like, if that's his, like, goal.
It wasn't for lack of trying. I mean, he did blow up their house.
He was trying. He was pretty close.
Yeah, with a bomb that just happened to go off at the right exact second.
Welcome to the Fast and the Furious franchise, Dan.
I don't know. I think these aren't really big issues you could say are ridiculously different than any of the other movies.
Yeah,
at the end of the
I would
day.
agree. Then, as far as Kurt Russell goes, the thing that I didn't like about him was, I don't know if you guys had read about it at all, but he, basically The Rock wasn't even going to be in this film at all. Mm-hmm. And he was, I think he was working on Hercules, I believe. Uh-huh. So he wasn't supposed to be in the film, but then after it got delayed because of Paul Walker's death, he got added into the film, which I think is part of the reason that, like, he's only at the beginning and then at the end. It was kind of, like, filmed more, like, after the fact. Mm-hmm. So I believe Kurt Russell's character was kind of, like, to take over that, like, FBI or, like, secret agent, like, authority type thing. And then he just doesn't compare to The Rock for me, though. And I just, the whole time I was like,
he doesn't.
I just wish The Rock would have been in there more instead of, like, his character. And that's what bugged me the most about him.
Well, I mean, he's not The Rock, but he's Kurt Russell. He's more legendary than The Rock. I'm sorry.
He's more legendary than The Rock, but for this franchise, it's about fun, and I feel like nobody is more charismatic and fun than The Rock.
You're right. You know, The
At
Rock,
least in contemporary cinema, yeah.
The Rock is very charismatic and fun. You're right, and he definitely associated more with this. But for Kurt Russell to step in if The Rock couldn't come back, he still filled his role pretty well. He's not going to try and copy The Rock's entire deal. He's a different character. I thought he was fine. I thought he had some good lines. You know, there's some funny things there. If he came back for the next one, it'd be fine for that.
I can respect that, but The Rock's lines were, as you want to talk lines, The Rock's lines were great in this one, I thought, personally. I thought that was one of my favorite things of the movie.
Woman, I am the cavalry.
Yeah, I just loved hearing his like ridiculous lines. It was full-on camp, I believe, in this one, and not nearly serious. He was definitely just hamming it up and just having a good time.
Pretty much.
And his character was one of my favorite parts of this one. Overall, I do think that this is good, but it's definitely not the best. Part of the problem might be I didn't get to see it right away, and it was a little hyped up for me. I talked to like people at work, and people were like saying how great it was, and just being a fan of the franchise, I thought it was good, but it's not what I was necessarily expecting for like the one that could possibly be the last or could not, but like a Paul Walker tribute, just like all the hype behind it, I just thought it would be something more.
Yeah, we didn't see it till Monday, and by that point, pretty much everybody and their mother came out crying, and this is the greatest movie of the franchise. And,
that always hurts.
Yeah, it did. It hurt a little bit for me too. I mean, I'll keep it brief just because we talked about this on the show, but yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that it's having a lot of fun still. It continues that good balance in 6, but it's just not as good of a film because of pretty much everything you just said, Aidan. I mean, I didn't mind Kurt Russell maybe as much as you did, but he just can't compete with The Rock. The Rock is great in 5 and 6, and the drone war at the end really is tedious, compared to the bank safe and the runway. It's just not as good. And I loved, though, all of the action sequences that we talked about, the airplane and the jumping from the buildings. I thought they were great. So it has that aspect to it. I don't think it's certainly the best of the franchise, but I think it is pretty close. Justin?
Now, I feel like there's 2 real big takeaways from this movie. The first is, as I think this will always be known for, everyone involved with the franchise loved Paul with every fiber of their being. And I think the second is director James Wan, usually known for his horror movies and gritty thrillers, is totally on board and willing to bring this up to the next level. There isn't much here for the uninitiated. I feel like the story, as all 3 of you have mentioned, is very meh. And honestly, I would say that this is the worst acting in the entire franchise, save to Tokyo Drift. But for the most part, I still think it remains lively and fun. I wish they would abandon the whole overstuffing concept, but apparently it's working, and this has already made about $1 billion. Stop me at any time.
1.4, I believe. It's already the number, 7 grosser of all time worldwide.
But I feel like this is another case of if they had just halved this storyline, it would have made a world of difference. Particularly given the fact that there just isn't that much going on here. It's fun. It's just not as amazing as the last couple.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I do think the CGI was kind of obvious at the end, but like Joe said, it didn't really affect me that much. I mean,
I'll be completely
what
honest.
could they do?
I'll be completely honest with you guys. I didn't even notice it. So, maybe you guys have better eyes than I do. I don't know, but I didn't care. I was like...
I don't know. I felt like there were better ways to retire his character without having to rely on all these crazy close-ups. But, I mean, this is also a fact that we talked about heavily on Film Fanatics.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to go into too much detail. But, I mean, I do think that the tribute at the end was
thought it was
good.
forgivable. I'm like,
yeah.
I don't like...
I thought it was emotional.
What are you going to do? Who cares?
I mean, it wasn't the baby in American Sniper.
It's like,
Well, no.
No.
Maybe we'll forever live on an infamy.
No,
But
big baby controversy.
That's good. Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was all right for what it was. Joe, what's your grade on Furious 7?
I actually enjoyed it the most. I give it a B+.
Wow, okay. Aidan?
I give it a B-.
Yeah, it's a B- for me as well. Justin?
same as Furious 6, C+.
Okay. So your favorite of the series is what, 5?
4.
4, okay.
My least favorite.
Yeah, one of my least favorites. I really did not care for 4 at all.
Weird.
Yeah.
Interesting opinion.
Aiden, for you and I, it's number 6. Joe, what was your favorite? Was it
7?
Was it 7? Okay.
Yeah, I thought 6
B+,
was,
that's true.
6 was a close second for sure. But I guess, I don't know, I just thought I liked the fact that it was even goofier and more over the top and fun. And I think just all the heart and the Paul Walker thing, I thought it worked really well as a culmination.
Yeah, I do too. I thought it was very fitting. Now, before we wrap up, there is some sort of leaked news, I guess, about what may or may not happen in number 8.
Yeah, you guys basically told me about this. Apparently, there's a possibility that if there is going to be an 8th one, which I guess
There's definitely an 8th one.
There will be.
There's
Yeah,
gonna be an 8th one
that's
'cause
already been announced.
it's going to mean a ton of money.
Last I've heard, I believe they're trying to go up to at least 10.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they want to close at 10.
That's their
Well,
goal, yeah.
to be honest, based on the residuals from all they made from the last couple,
Why
they could
not?
make 3 more
Yeah.
and not even worry about. They'll at least break even. And apparently, they're going to be casting Helen Mirren to, I guess, be the next spy caper subsidiary they'll be working with. And if the question is, how do I feel about it? I feel like, I guess, if Kurt Russell's not coming back, she'll kind of take the stand-in, and they might go another way, and she'll offer them another mission for another heist or to stop some terrorist somewhere or whatever they're doing. And I think she's fine. She's a great actress. I mean, she elevates pretty much whatever movie she's in.
That is true.
And we've seen she can do action with the Red movies, so I think she'd be really a good fit here. I'm happy to see it, and honestly, it's kind of funny. It's a bit of a turnaround for me coming from somebody who knew very little about Fast and Furious and who really hated the 4th movie when I saw it all those years ago. I actually think that I've gotten more on board. These movies are more fun, and I'm definitely looking forward to the 8th one and more if they make them.
Yeah, I am as well, and I guess nothing's really been set in stone with this Helen Mirren thing, but yeah, she made a comment that she really, really enjoys these movies. And I guess that got back to the studio, and so people are saying, oh, well,
Why not?
Why not?
Bring
And
it on.
If you're Vin Diesel producing this thing, why would you not have Helen Mirren in your movie if you could?
Yeah.
She brings some prestige to it, and she brings, like you said, she's great in the Red series as this sort of fun action heroine.
And I feel like that might be something they should do. I know The Rock, The Rock is a big part of the crew now, and I think that when he came in 5, it was to add more credibility almost, and I think that's kind of the
I
theme
agree.
they're going with. Like, if The Rock is part of the steady crew, or if he does leave, you'll add somebody in. They had Kurt Russell in 7, maybe Helen Mirren in 8, and they could make it a consistent thing. Who's going to be the next big actor that guest stars in this to help elevate it?
Well, and here's bringing yet another new audience into this series.
Yeah, think about all
the
the,
Helen Mirren elderly demographic.
Yeah, the older fans,
Yeah.
the older fans of Helen Mirren might be more interested. Like, okay, if she'll be in this movie, let's check out these Fast and Furious movies. Oh wow, all the kids like them. Let's go watch the older ones, see if they're any good, and they'll be disappointed by half of them. But
Yes, they will.
That's more money, though, right?
Justin, what do you think of it?
I'm very much on the why not department with this. If it happens, fantastic. I think it could really use some costs, and I think it would take the whole franchise to a whole new level. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm not saying it's a really good idea. It's just
Why not?
why not? Exactly. But the thought that really struck me was the possibility that Eva Mendes may come back as a main character again.
Oh yeah, I read about that too. I forgot
Yeah.
Well,
because I hate her so
And
much.
that may very well be my opinion about it. It's like, in the case of why not, the follow-up to that to that statement is why?
Yeah, why would you have Eva Mendes in anything,
Well,
first of all? But
She was in the second movie, which is inconsequential.
which is inconsequential and nobody likes.
That is one of the lower rated ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what would the point be? I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot about her as always. Aidan, let's close with you. What do you think about that?
I think the big question for me is whether they'll bring back Kurt Russell or not, because whether I liked his character or didn't like his character, I can't really see Helen Mirren doing anything else but playing that type of character. So I think if they have Kurt Russell and they have The Rock in some facet and try to bring her in too, it's just going to bloat the movies
the
even
point
more
be?
than there is.
First Fast and the Furious villainous?
Ooh.
That would be more intriguing. So I guess it's more what role they would bring her in as to whether I would.
Well, to be honest, she might be more active than Kurt Russell because he wasn't as... He did get involved in the action, but we've seen her do bigger stunts than he's done in years. So with the Red 2, I remember she was like in that big car chase. So maybe she could be interjected in a more physical role.
Yeah.
If she's up to it.
And I do agree. I'm kind of with Justin on the why not type opinion, but at the same time, I don't necessarily know if they need her because she does have the red and stuff like that. And I feel like she isn't there. The Woman in Gold was kind of mixed opinion. I mean, it was okay, but I feel like she's got a good thing going now post Red with some of her dramatic, like, historical roles. She was in, like, 100-Foot Journey and stuff like that. I feel like she has a good thing going, so I feel like she doesn't necessarily need to do this, or they don't necessarily need her. I don't know if it would add anything, but I don't think it would hurt it either, so I mean,
why not, basically?
Yeah, why not?
All right, well, that is going to wrap up our Fast and Furious special episode here. Aidan, thank you for joining us on the show.
I had fun. Thanks, guys.
Pretty
Thanks
good.
for letting me
Well, thanks for coming.
join in and give it a go.
Yeah, to our listeners, if you have not subscribed to our channel yet, go ahead and do that on YouTube here, and you can join us on Facebook, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and our Twitter feed is @FilmFanaticsPod. And we'll see you back here next time.